Have you ever wondered what IA firms are looking for in new adjusters? Hello, I'm Geoff Conrad. I've been in this industry for over 20 years and I've trained over 10,000 adjusters. So in this video, you will learn 4 things that will not only get you hired and deployed, but also set you up for many future deployments starting now. There's adjusters out there that are just licensed only, that are just waiting for a deployment because they feel they're going to be trained on the deployment, and that is a disaster waiting to happen. So carriers are really frustrated with IA firms and the quality of production that adjusters are producing. I want this industry to be full of good people, adjusters that practice their trade. If you're new, invest in training. Do not show up to a deployment not knowing how to talk to customers. Master those soft skills. We have to master them. And also, practice the estimating programs, whether it's Xactimate or Totality. You've got to be ready to go. One of the things that I see a lot of adjusters do in this industry is they go to an Xactimate class, they learn Xactimate, and then after the class is over, they close the laptop and they put it on a shelf and they wait for deployment. That deployment can come tomorrow. That deployment can come a week from now. Sometimes it can come 6 months to a year or longer. Now, just know that I always kind of use this analogy that Xactimate is not like a bicycle. Once you learn it, you got it. It's a musical instrument, and you've got to practice this instrument, I would say weekly, if at the least, but the best adjusters practice this daily. And then practice this trade. I always kind of encourage adjusters that are just newly trained to adjust a friend. And what I mean by that is that you've learned how to, review a policy. You learned the customer experience. You learned how to scope. You learned how to write an estimate. Go find a friend or family member and treat them like a policyholder. Make that initial call. Go over their policy with them. Discuss their deductible, because a lot of times their deductible, if it's in the thousands, 6 or 7, that's the first time they've seen it because they've never read the thing. And so you're also kind of helping them know what their claim going to be like if they experience a loss too. So go over their policy with them, treat them as if there was a policyholder, schedule an appointment, go out there, scope, and make up some type of damage and write an estimate and then settle with them. I'm telling you, that friend or family member will give you brutal and honest feedback about your performance. And those are things that you can kind of take back and improve upon for your next one. And so by doing so, you're practicing this amazing profession and you're going to be exceptional. You're going to be well above the masses that are on a deployment, and you're going to be the top performer. And guess who's going to be the last one to leave that deployment? Well, that's going to be you, because you put in the work, you put in the effort, you put in the time, and you invested in yourself. So make a name for yourself. You got a starring role coming up for your next deployment. You've got to make an impression, and that impression comes with preparation. For example, I went through my first estimating class. It wasn't even Xactimate. We're talking right after it got released after Katrina. They were offering MSB IntegraClaim classes. And I remember I was in a class about 40 people, and at the end of day 1, we were using laptops that were owned by the company. And at the end, the instructor stated, hey, anybody wants me to put MSB on their personal laptop, come up here at the end of the class and I'll install it. Out of 40 people, I was probably one of 6. And so once I got it installed, I was so excited to go home and just practice. And I practiced until like 1 a.m. because I wanted to not only know the program, I wanted to move quickly through the program. And so the next day, the instructor says, hey, we're going to write an estimate. I'm not kidding. I was done in 15 minutes. It took the rest of the class probably 45 minutes to an hour to write that estimate. And I remember walking up to the instructor. His name was Kenny Defnall, and he was my first mentor. And I said, Kenny, I'm done. And he's like, you're not done. And I said, Kenny, I'm done. And he came over, he looked at my estimate, and he's like, good job. By the end of that class, I was on a deployment. Just know that trainers, regardless of who you're training with, if you're training with Matt, you've got to step out of the norm and set yourself apart. And that is doing extra, working harder, perfecting your skill, making a name for yourself. I'm telling you, the industry does pay attention to those types of people. I've taught hundreds of classes over the times, and I can tell you from my observation who are going to be the great adjusters and who are going to be the ones that are just going to fizzle away very quickly. And the one divider there are the ones who care, the ones who put in the work, the ones who practice, the ones who say, you know what, I'm going to be great and I'm going to practice this thing, and I'm not going to just close up everything and wait for that deployment. I want to make a difference. Folks, let's talk about licensing and how important those state licenses are. And before I start talking about that, I want to tell you a story. So we had I was working in a inside claims office, and we've had probably about 100, 200 adjusters there. And we just kept seeing that claim volume drop. And we all kind of saw it coming, where the carrier was going to ask for some cuts, and everybody was just kind of, working hard, keep their heads down. Unfortunately, the email came out that these 30 people need to show up in the training room, and that conversation was had that, hey, based off the claim volume, the carrier is asking for a downsizing. And the best advice that I can give you is accept that. It's not you're not being released because of performance, or anything like that. It's just the nature of the industry. You are working yourself out of a job, and hopefully you performed well where you get invited back again. Well, how you leave is also how you come back. So we actually had one gentleman who was very upset that he was selected in the first wave, and just started pointing at people and says, I'm better than you. I worked harder than you. My scores are better than you. And sadly, he was fired. He will never work for the company again, for the carrier. And what he didn't realize is that it had nothing to do with his performance. It just came down to the number of licenses. He'd been working for 6 months, and he only had 3 licenses, and the rest of the folks had around 5 or 6. But the adjusters that remained had 22 licenses. That was their average. And so the decision was made based off of the number of licenses, not performance, because those other adjusters that have all these licenses are more valuable to the operation because they can work more states, thus more claims. With that understanding is that you've got to invest in your profession and get those licenses. And that way that makes you more attractive to the IA firms and the carriers that have losses in those states. So I always get asked the question, Jeff, what licenses do I need? Well, I always start with Texas. I always kind of joke that, the song God Bless Texas. No, God does not like Texas. There's always something bad going on in Texas, whether it's tornadoes, ice storms, occasional hurricanes, and it's a big state. So there's more opportunities for claims. And then I also tell folks to kind of look at the industry that we're in, or the season that we're in. The Gulf Coast states for your hurricane season, East Coast, and then also Tornado Alley, the Midwest. The thing is, it all kind of depends on the carrier who you're working for too, or who you want to work for, and where their exposures are. So, if you've got a limited budget, you definitely want to be strategic there. If you're working as an adjuster, you should be taking a portion of your paychecks and plugging it right back in and buying up those licenses. I'm telling you, it will create longevity in this industry for sure. Another one that always kind of, the industry's like, hey, that's the holy grail, and that is New York. Why? It's very difficult to get. It's low expensive. It's hard. But again, like I mentioned to you before, everyone else is taking the easy road. If you want to make a name for yourself, do something that no one else is doing. And that is to go get that New York licenses. And I'm telling you, a lot of times opportunities are created because you took that extra step. You did something that no one else is doing, and you will be rewarded for that. So again, it's just part of this industry. If you want to be great at it, you've got to invest in it. And so training and licenses will absolutely set you up for success. On every deployment, you are auditioning for your next deployment. So you want to be prepared, you want to be ready to go. And we've talked about, that initial call and making a good first impression. But another problem that I see in this industry is adjusters dropping the ball at the goal line. You've written a great estimate. You've paid the customer. Everything is, about ready to be wrapped up. And then we make that settlement phone call and we're like, hey, do you have any questions? And the customer's like, no, because they don't know what questions to ask. And you just thank them for being a customer and you hang up the phone. So I want you to remember a catchphrase that how it ends is how it was. And what I mean by that is that you want to make sure the customer knows that once this claim is closed, it's not finite. It's not the end. And there's a level of panic that customers kind of feel like, hey, maybe this initial amount that they're looking at is not enough. It's just a feeling that they get. And so they're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to say, well, what's the next thing that I have to do here? I'm looking at this estimate. It's got depreciation. What if my contractor's estimate's much higher? What do I need to do? That's where the great adjusters step in and go, you know what? The settlement call is more than just a settlement call. It's to set them up for the next step in their claim, because for them, the claim is not over. Don't sacrifice the customer experience, because carriers are tracking those metrics more than any metric. I'm telling you, that's where the future is the adjusters that are great people, great humans, and we need to protect that human element in all of the claims that we handle as independent adjusters. Carriers want higher quality adjusters. They are paying attention to the customer experience metrics, and they're paying attention to the estimates, how accurate they are, and making sure that they follow the estimating guidelines. I'm telling you, whenever I teach a class, I will grade an adjuster from 1 to 10. Okay. I would say 5 can do the job. When I'm on a deployment and I'm in the support rooms, if I have a 5, I can easily get you to a 7 or 8. But if I've got a 0 or a 1 or 2 on a deployment, it is extremely difficult to get that 1 or 2 to a 5. And it's exhausting. And if you want to know how much you can earn as an IA, check out this next video. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have a great storm.